But at the same time, there was a big event happening with the Canadian government. The Pierre Trudeau government wanted to wanted to patriate a constitution for Canada. In other words, for Canada to become a nation, to have its own constitution. So
I'm going to do a historian's interlude
mhm,
here. I know this is surprising to some people, but up until 1982, the British Parliament had the last word on our laws and our policies, I guess, right? So they were legally in charge of our Constitution. So as part of Trudeau's sort of patriotic movement, he promised that he would take that power back to this nation state, and that the authority of the Queen and the Crown in Canada would be severed.
so knowing that that's about to come about, a lot of the First Nation leadership across Canada began to be concerned what happens with our treaty rights if responsibility for treaties switches over to a Canadian government rather than the British Crown. They wanted to assure that something was going to solidify that in the new constitution. So what happened is a group of chiefs went to England to go to visit the Queen and talk to the Queen about the treaty and specifically about the annuity and how the annuity should be augmented from time to time. Well, when they got there, they didn't get an audience with the Queen. They met with an official there, and who listened to the story and said, "Thank you very much for coming. It was a nice story, and I really enjoyed meeting with you today." That was it. So when they come back, they said, "Well, I think we better start some action to get our court case going." So that went on for a long time, from the early '80s to the 1990s. What happened is the action started with the Union of Ontario Indians because the Union of Ontario Indians had treaty dollars that were transferred over to the Union of Ontario Indians to do treaty research. So they began using that money for treaty research. And then when they decided they were going to use that money to take a court case against Canada, well, that was a big no-no. You can't use that money for that purpose. So then what happened is the First Nations then decided that they got to find their own money to take this to court. So, long story short.
No, we want the long story long. Come on, it's a good story.
Right. So anyway, 1992, I was elected to the Council of Nipissing First Nation, and one of my first tasks was to attend a meeting of the Lake Huron Regional Chiefs meeting. And this was, I recall that it was in Sudbury. Can't remember the place in Sudbury, but I do remember that it was in Sudbury. So I went there and listened to what was happening, and then when I came back and reported back to the chief and council, the chief said to me, "I want you to continue to attend all of these meetings and work on our behalf in this process." So I started from there, 1992, and here I am today. But in between that, there was a lot of information, a lot of things that happened.
So was that chief, are we talking about Jerry Bocage or Margaret Panasse?
That was Chief Jerry Bocage, who was the chief at the time when I was elected in 1990. And then when after he had a 2-year term, and then Chief Margaret Panasse Mai became the chief, and she reaffirmed my responsibility to attend those meetings on behalf of Nipissing First Nation.
And I just want to return to that first time you went to the Lake Huron Regional Chiefs meeting. I think you've told me this twice now. You said after that meeting, after hearing the story and where they were at in the struggle, you made up your mind. I've heard you use that phrase twice. You made up your mind that you were going to stay with this issue. And I also heard you say that you decided specifically to stay in contact with people on this issue.
That's right. Yeah, because even though I had other things, I had a full-time job for one thing, working on the railway, and then I had most of my evenings were pretty busy with the council work, but I still had time to attend these meetings and keep in touch with these people that were discussing ways of moving the issue forward.